So one of the questions I get a lot is, Paul, what's the difference between a revocable and an irrevocable trust? So I kind of cringe when I get that question because it's both a simple question and a very complex question. I'm going to attempt to tackle it in just a few short minutes in this video. I'm Paul Rabelais. I'm an estate planning attorney, serve our clients around the state of Louisiana. So we get that question a lot. What's the difference between a revocable and an irrevocable trust? So, whenever somebody asks me that question, I got to really understand why they're asking me that question, because people could go on for days trying to answer that question. But in its most simple form, a revocable trust, and starts with the letter R. Revocable is obvious, something you can revoke, which also means you can change it, you can amend it, you can undo it. And an irrevocable trust in general means you can't change it. Now, sometimes some irrevocable trusts, the people who set it up retain the right to change certain things, and certain things can't be changed, but that little component is way beyond the discussion on this video. So in general, revocable trust, you can change it, you can undo it, you can amend it. Irrevocable trust in general, can't change it. So why would somebody have one over the other? That's what I want to get into, because the protections and the ability to change things and the powers that different parties are given of a trust dictate the protections that are in place. So let's look at it practically. I always like to stay on the practical side. So let's take a look first at the revocable trust. Starts with an R. So the practical effect is all over America, all over Louisiana, people are setting up revocable trusts for the primary reason of avoiding probate when they die. Or we could say in Louisiana, avoiding the succession when they die. Or in layman's terms, avoiding assets being frozen and surviving family members having to hire lawyers like myself to guide them through a court process, because our government oversees the assets that are in your name when you die. So people establish these revocable living trusts. They keep all of the powers of the trust. They can do whatever they want to with their trust assets. There's no restrictions put on them whatsoever. But when they pass away, they will have designated one or more successor trustee or co-trustees who will have immediate ability to sell assets if needed, or disperse those assets to what's called the beneficiaries of the trust. And when that works well, it's a beautiful thing. So many people establish those revocable trusts, and for the purposes of avoiding that probate. However, because it's a revocable trust and the person who sets it up retains the power to just do whatever they want to do with the trust assets, certain protections that people are looking for are not achieved with that revocable trust. Let me give you a couple of examples. Some people want to put their assets in a revocable trust to get them out of their estate for purposes of the 40% federal estate tax. That applies when somebody dies and they have more than $11.4 million. Assets in a revocable trust, since you can do whatever you want to with them, they're still in your estate for estate tax purposes. Also, assets in a revocable trust, some people want to get assets out of their name, so if in the future they have to go into a nursing home and pay for that expensive long-term care, they've protected certain assets by putting them in a trust. Assets that you put in your revocable living trust don't give you that kind of quote-unquote nursing home protection. So, but the revocable trust, relatively simple to set up and maintain, and everything's still yours for tax purposes. You do whatever you want to with it, you change any of it, but it's titled in a way so that court-supervised process where the government oversees the transfer of things when you die is avoided. So that's the primary purpose of the revocable trust. Now let's shift over to the irrevocable trust, and there's a gazillion different kinds of irrevocable trust. In fact, I'll segue into the fact that maybe all, just about all revocable trusts become irrevocable after the person who sets up the trust, or the couple who sets up the trust passes away. So just to give an example, John and Mary, they set up their revocable living trust. They transfer their home and their investments and other assets to their trust. They both die. And at that point, the trust becomes irrevocable. John and Mary wouldn't want a trustee or anybody to be able to change the terms of their trust after John and Mary die. And maybe their trust says that son Tommy is the trustee and he's to divide up the assets equally among the three children, the three principal beneficiaries of the trust. So some, or virtually all, revocable trusts at some point become irrevocable. That's kind of the segue into the irrevocable trust. Now, why do people set up irrevocable trusts from the get-go? Could be, in general, 3 or 4 reasons, but there's many more. So I already mentioned a couple. Some people wealthy people want to get assets out of their estate for purposes of the 40% estate tax. Used to do this a whole lot more than we do it today, because used to be a couple of decades ago, when somebody died, if they had more than $600,000 in their estate, a 55% estate tax would apply on the value of what they owned, and that would affect many, many people. Now, though, the exemption is $11.4 million, and really for married couples, in effect, it's double that. So getting assets out of the estate and put them into irrevocable trusts for purposes of avoiding estate tax, we just don't see it much. The second reason people use irrevocable trust, this is common all over America, is people want to get assets out of their name and just in case they get sick in the future and they need to go into a nursing home. So people don't like transferring assets out of their name directly into their children's names because they lose control. And also there's some negative capital gains tax consequences that people and families incur when they just transfer assets from their name into their children's names. People don't like that. So using some form of a very particular irrevocable trust, not just any irrevocable trust, it has to comply with the state's, really federal government and states' long-term care Medicaid rules. But when it's the right kind of irrevocable trust, then it's a way in some form for parents to get assets technically out of their name for nursing home purposes, but still have some control over those assets even after those assets are out of their name. And so that irrevocable trust, the right kind of irrevocable trust vehicle, can help you accomplish that, because putting assets in your revocable trust with an R doesn't cut it. Medicaid laws are clear. Assets in your revocable living trust are what's considered a countable resource for Medicaid purposes. If you go in a nursing home, you got to deplete and spend all those assets. So that's another reason. And then there's other reasons for irrevocable trust. Some people have children with special needs, and so assets go into what's called a special needs trust to enable a disabled child to continue getting government benefits, but have other resources available to supplement what the government is doing for them. So those are maybe just kind of 3 quick reasons why people use irrevocable trusts. They typically give the person, well, I'll give you one other, escape me. Many people put assets into irrevocable trusts, and if they do it timely at the right time before there's an issue, some people worry, hey, if I get sued, I'm going to lose everything I own. Putting assets in a revocable, with an R, trust gives you no, as people call it, lawsuit protection. So again, that's another reason assets are put into certain, very particular, gotta follow the rules, certain types of irrevocable trusts in order to gain that creditor protection or asset protection or lawsuit protection, whatever you want to call it. So in theory, By putting assets in your revocable trust, you're not restricting yourself in any way. And since there are no restrictions on you to do whatever you want to do with the trust assets, they're still in your estate for estate tax purposes. They're still your assets for income tax purposes. They're still your assets for lawsuit purposes, and they're still your assets for nursing home purposes. But as you start creating irrevocable trusts and putting certain restrictions that can't be changed, and if you can live with that, then perhaps you can get some of these protections if you're losing some sleep, that you do not have those protections in place. So there's more to it than that, but that's the big picture, kind of from 30,000 feet high. Hope it gives you some guidance on this whole revocable versus irrevocable trust discussion. What I'd really like to see is maybe some comments on your thoughts, your experiences. Love to see you subscribe to the channel so that we can keep you notified. Love to see you give it, smash the thumbs up button so that YouTube, that you let YouTube know that, hey, there's something to these videos. We'd like to see more. And then I'll do my part to keep educating and keep providing as valuable information as I can provide to help you know what you need to know to make informed decisions about how to protect what you have for yourself and your family. I'm Paul Rabelais. That's the revocable versus irrevocable trust discussion. Go ahead and have a great day.